Hello, listeners. Have a wonderful new day.
The hospital discharged me at 5 in the evening. They put my papers in a plastic sleeve, and an orderly named Miguel wheeled me to the front in a chair I did not want to be sitting in. Adrienne walked beside us, holding her phone the way another woman might hold a rosary. And when we reached the covered curb by the emergency entrance, she said one sentence to me. The first full sentence since she had arrived. "Daddy, you sit right here for 10 minutes. I'll go pull the car around." Then she was gone. I stood up from the wheelchair on my own. Miguel offered to wait. I told him no. I had been getting up off chairs for 75 years and was not about to start needing help now. He laughed the polite laugh of a young man who has heard old men say things they will later regret, and wheeled the chair back inside. It was raining, not hard. The kind of late fall mist that the wine country gets in November, when the fog cannot decide whether to lift or fall. I sat on the wooden bench under the awning, pulled my discharge papers closer to my chest, and looked at my watch. The watch was the one Rosalind gave me for our 13th anniversary in 1992. She had bought it with money saved from a particularly good Pinot Noir vintage. The strap had been replaced 4 times. The watch itself still kept perfect time. 5:15, 5:25, 5:40. I called her. 4 rings. Then voicemail. I did not leave a message. I had once been an accountant in San Francisco. I knew what a real meeting looked like, the kind a person could not step out of. She was probably in the parking lot. Any minute now, 5:55. The fog had thickened. The awning was no longer keeping the mist off my coat. A thin navy windbreaker I had grabbed when the ambulance came that morning. I could feel my heart in my throat the way a man with arrhythmia feels his heart in his throat. Not painful, just present. Like an animal asking to be remembered. I called a second time. A third. A fourth. Each call I gave her 4 rings and hung up before voicemail. Because I did not want to seem desperate. I did not want to be the man calling his daughter 11 times. I did not yet know I was already becoming that man. By the 8th call, I had stopped looking at the parking lot. I had started looking at my own hands. They were an old man's hands now. I do not know when that happened. I had missed that morning the way I had missed most of the mornings that mattered. The 9th call. The 10th. On the 11th, she did not answer. But 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed in my palm and a message came through. "Dad, I'm in a serious meeting with serious people. Get an Uber. We can talk later." I read it. Then I read it again. Then I read it a third time, very slowly. The way an accountant rereads a line item that does not square. Serious people. 3 words. Not my father is serious. Not my father, who just had a heart event this morning, is serious. Just other people, in another room, were the serious ones. I had been demoted, in 3 words, from a person to a delay. A voice cut through the fog. "Sir." I looked up. A man stood under the awning a few feet from me, in a Navy volunteer vest. Otto Kessler, his badge read. About my age. Broad in the shoulder. Gray at the temples. With the patient walking style of a man who has spent a working life carrying people who did not want to be carried. "Sir," he said again. "Looks like your daughter is losing that argument." I almost laughed. I do not know what stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe the small, dignified instinct that tells an old man not to break in front of strangers. He looked at the empty curb. He looked at my coat. He looked at my hands. Then he said, "Come on inside. You can wait inside. Otto Kessler had been a fire captain in San Francisco for 30 years. He had lost his only son in a structure fire in 1998. He told me later, with no particular emotion, that he volunteered here because it gave him a reason to leave the house. He took my elbow, the way one old man takes another old man's elbow, when the second one has been left outside in the rain and does not yet know how to ask to come in. We went inside. A nurse named Constance Whitmore was at the discharge desk. She looked up when Otto walked me in, and her face changed. "Mr. Calloway." She said it like a doctor reading the worst line on a chart. "I am all right," I said, out of habit. She looked at Otto. He shook his head once. That was all she needed. She took my damp papers from the plastic sleeve, laid them flat under the lamp, and with infinite patience began to dry them with a small towel. Then she started typing into her computer. "What are you writing?" I asked. "An incident note. I do not want any trouble." I said. "Mr. Calloway." She said, "Notes are not gossip. Sometimes they are how people get protected." She wrote for almost a full minute. Then she said, very quietly, without looking up, "I heard your daughter on the phone in the hallway earlier. She said you did not have much fight left. She said they could close before harvest end." My phone rang. It was not Adrian. It was Esperanza. Her voice cracked on the first word. "Mr. Calloway, you need to come home right now. I found something in the kitchen, a manila envelope, and I think you need to see it before this night is over." Otto Kessler drove me home. He did not have to. He drove a 15-year-old Buick LeSabre that smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and aftershave, and we rode the 12 miles from the hospital in the kind of silence two men our age sometimes share, when neither of us wants to ruin a good thing with words. He pulled into the gravel drive at 6:55 and waited until I was through the front door before backing out. He never said goodbye. He just lifted 2 fingers off the steering wheel and was gone. Adrienne never came back to the hospital. The kitchen door creaked when I opened it. The hinge had been creaking for 3 years. Rosalind had said she would oil it, and then she had gotten sick, and then she had not gotten better. And then the door had gone on creaking after she was gone, the way the small, unfinished things in any old house do. A house holds its dead in the unfinished things. I did not turn on the light. I do not know why. Maybe because the dark felt like the right kind of company. The only light in the room came from the street lamp out front, filtered through the lace curtains Rosalind had bought in Mendocino in 2003. A particular kind of light, soft, forgiving. The light of a kitchen that had been loved. I made coffee, black, the way my father had taken it, the way I had taken it for 50 years. I poured a cup. I sat down at the kitchen table and I looked at the photograph on the shelf above the coffee maker. Rosalind. 1988. A red and black flannel shirt. The cuffs rolled to the elbow, standing in front of the Zinfandel rose with the morning fog still settling around her boots. She was 41 in that picture. Her hair was darker than I remembered it. She had picked the wrong angle for her face, but the right angle for her soul. She was looking at the camera the way she looked at me when she knew I was wrong about something and was waiting for me to figure it out on my own. I let the coffee sit until the steam had gone out of it. Then I opened the bottom drawer of the kitchen cabinet, the one Rosalind had used for tea towels and embroidered placemats. and I reached under the stacked linen until my fingers found the old shoebox I had not opened in 38 years. I lifted it out. I set it on the table. I took the lid off slowly, the way a man unwraps something he is not sure he wants to see again. The painting was still there, a drawing, really, done in colored pencil and a child's careful patience. A man in a gray suit stood on the left side of the page. A piano stood on the right. Between them, an empty space the size of a hand. The page was 8.5 by 11 inches. The white space between the man and the piano was, by my estimate, 3 inches across. 3 inches. Just enough to be impossible to cross. My daughter had drawn this in May of 1988. She was 8 years old. Her first piano recital was that same week in the multi-purpose room of Healdsburg Elementary School. I was in the middle of an audit for Hartwell Agricultural Holdings, the largest account at the firm. Mason Hartwell Sr. had told me that morning he would consider any partner who left before close of business unsuitable for partnership. I had sent flowers, pink and white carnations. I had told my daughter on the phone the night before that they would be the prettiest flowers in the room. Rosalind had sat in the second row. She had clapped harder than anyone. Adrienne, when her piece was finished, had looked out into the audience and searched the rows the way a child searches a crowd. And when she had not found me, she had bowed slightly faster than the other children and walked off the stage. That night, she did not cry. She did not eat dinner. She sat on the floor of her bedroom with a fresh sheet of paper and a pencil, and she drew this picture. Rosalind found it the next morning under the bed. She did not throw it away. She brought it to me at the office 2 days later, set it on my desk without a word, and turned around and walked out. That night, after dinner, after 2 glasses of a Pinot Noir we had been saving, she had said the only thing she would ever say to me about it. "You will pay for this, Theodore. It may not be today. It may not be next year. But you will pay." I had laughed. I had thought she was teasing. She had not been teasing. I had kept the drawing in the bottom of a shoebox at the back of a drawer in the kitchen of a house she would die in. 38 years before I would find myself sitting at a table looking at it again. After my daughter had left me at a hospital curb in the rain to talk to people more serious than her father. I do not know how long I sat there with the drawing in my hand. The coffee got cold. The street lamp outside flickered once. I thought, very quietly, of all the small white spaces I had let widen between us over the years. Each recital I had missed for a meeting. Each Christmas I had taken half a day at the office. Each call I had not returned because I had been working a number that did not square. 3 inches across, by 8 years old. I was still holding the drawing when someone knocked at the kitchen door. 8:15. Esperanza, in a wet wool coat. Her hair flattened with rain. She did not say hello. She walked in and set the manila envelope on the table beside my cold coffee. And she said one thing only. "Mr. Calloway, you need to see what is in this envelope before you sleep tonight." Esperanza set the envelope on the table beside my cold coffee. She did not sit down. She did not take off her wet coat. She stood at the end of the table with her hands folded the way a woman folds her hands when she is afraid of what those hands might do if she let them go. I opened the envelope. A document inside, 12 pages, stapled at the top left corner. printed on heavy white paper of the kind law firms use when they want their work to feel like granite. The header on the first page read, "Termination Schedule First Quarter of 2027." The subheader read, "Callaway Vineyards Workforce Restructuring Confidential." There was no author. There was no signature. There were only 41 names. I read them by street lamp, each name on its own line. After each name, an age. After each age, a dollar figure. The figures were small, the way figures look when they have been calculated by people who do this work for a living and have learned to round down. Number 7 on the list was Esperanza Ruiz, 62 years old, $4,217.50. Number 12 was Inez Ruiz, Esperanza's sister, 59 years old, $3,890. Inez had type 2 diabetes. She had been on insulin since 1998. The insurance supplement that kept her supplied with it had been quietly paid for by me, out of a separate account, for the last 12 years. I had never told her. I had never told Esperanza. I had told no one. Rosalind had known. Number 19 was Mateo Robles, 73 years old, $7,402.10. The highest figure on the page. Severance. I knew without being told. Scaled by tenure. Mateo had come to the vineyard in 1984. I read every name. All 41. Some of them were grandchildren of the men and women who had come with Rosalind and me when we bought the first 10 acres. Some of them were the parents of children who had grown up at the harvest festivals my wife had run for 19 years. My hands were not shaking. My voice, when I finally spoke, was not shaking either. I do not know how that is possible. I think a man my age has spent so much of his life shaking quietly that, by the time something terrible enough comes along to deserve the shaking, he has nothing left to give it. Esperanza, I said. Who left this in the kitchen? She lowered her eyes. Your daughter, she said. This afternoon. Before she drove to the hospital. She was in the office for 20 minutes. She must have dropped it, I said. And the rose garden. Esperanza did not answer at first. Then she said, very softly, in the voice of someone who has been hoping not to be the one who had to tell me. The Voss woman had them dug out last Tuesday. She told us you had agreed. She told us they were going to be replaced with lavender. For the photographs, I sat very still. What I said next, I said because I could not yet bring myself to say anything else. Show me in the morning. I went to the rose garden before the sun was up. The fog had not lifted overnight. It almost never does, this time of year. I walked the gravel path with a flashlight that did not work, and I did not need it, because I had walked that path more times in my life than I had walked any other path. And a man who has walked a path that often does not need light to find his way. The garden was gone. That is the simplest way to say it. There had been 47 rose bushes, planted between 1990 and last spring. One for every birthday I had bought Rosalind a rose for. The earth was bare. 46 holes had been dug. The soil had been turned. The rose bushes were gone. One bush remained. It was an old Mr. Lincoln in the far corner near the fence, half hidden under the live oak. The crew must have run out of light or run out of patience because they had left it standing. There was one bloom on it, a late one, deep red, almost black at the edges where the cold had touched it, open all the way. I did not pick it. I did not even kneel down. I have a bad back, and I had pneumonia, and I am 75 years old, and I did not have it in me to bend that low. I just stood and looked. I thought of Rosalind in her thick canvas gardening gloves. Her fingertips always pricked, laughing at me when I complained about another birthday rose. "Theodore," she had said once, "you complain like a man who has never been given a gift he had to wait for. The roses are the only things in this house that get more beautiful every year you forget to notice them." I had told her she was the only thing in this house that got more beautiful. She had said, "Then you have not been looking closely enough at the roses." I had not been looking closely. Not at the roses. Not at her. Not at any of it. I was still standing in the empty garden when Mateo Robles came up the path on his way to the Cabernet Rose. He stopped beside me. He did not look at the garden. He did not look at the one remaining bloom. He looked at me. He put one hand on my shoulder. He did not say anything. He left it there for a moment. Then he took it away. Then he walked on. I stood there a long time after he was gone. The path from the rose garden to the southeast corner of the vineyard was 800 meters. I walked it slowly. My back hurt from the pneumonia and from the 75 years that came before the pneumonia. The fog was thinning. By the time I reached the corner, the gray was beginning to take on the pale gold of a morning that had decided, finally, to begin. The vines were the first ones we planted. 1981. Rosalind had picked the spot herself. She said the soil at the southeast corner had something to it that the rest of the property did not. The Zinfandel from those two vines was always the best on the place. We blended it with the others so that nobody knew. Rosalind had insisted. She did not want her favorite vines to become a label. I sat down on the wet grass at the base of the older of the two. My pants got wet immediately. I did not care. This was where I had scattered her ashes. June of 2022. It had been the only day that month without fog. A clear sky for the 12 people gathered under those vines. A kind of providence. Mateo had stood at my left. Esperanza had laid a single white chrysanthemum on the soil at the base of the older vine. Beatrice Holm had stood at the back, watching the way a woman watches who is keeping track of what other people are not keeping track of. Adrienne had not come. She had sent a video message instead, from the back of a town car somewhere in Los Angeles. Her husband Spencer had been beside her in the frame. I had received it on the morning of the scattering, and I had never opened it. Not that day. Not in the 4 years since. I sat there now with the wet grass soaking through my pants, and I thought, for the first time, of asking Magnolia to play me that video. Just to know what my daughter had said. I did not call her. I did not know yet how to ask my granddaughter to do a thing like that. I spoke instead to the soil. I do not know if other men talk to their dead. I do not ask. But I had been talking to Rosalind in this corner since the morning after we buried her. And she had been answering me the way she answered me when she was alive, rarely with words. Almost always with a kind of pressure in the air that told me whether what I had just thought was correct. "Honey," I said, "I do not know what to do with our daughter." I waited. The wind moved through the rows. The vines made the small, dry sound that old vines make when they have nothing left to do but listen. "You always knew," I said. "I made the money. You raised her. Now she is trying to kill you a second time. And I do not know if I have enough time left to learn how to be the kind of father you wanted me to be." The wind shifted. A small thing. But I felt it. Rosalind's way of telling me I was being maudlin. I almost laughed. I almost cried. I did neither. In the end, I just stayed where I was for a while. Then I took the phone out of my coat pocket, and I called Beatrice home. Beatrice picked up on the first ring. She must have been holding the phone in her hand when it rang. She must have been holding it in her hand for years. "Teddy," she said. I did not say hello back. I said her name. That was all I could manage at first. She waited. She knew how to wait. She had been a lawyer for 48 years and had spent at least 30 of them waiting for old men to find words for things they had been too proud to find words for previously. "Teddy," she said again. After what felt like a long time, but was probably less than a minute. "I have been waiting for this call for 14 years. I did not know what to say to that." She kept going. Her voice was the voice of a 71-year-old woman who had smoked one Pall Mall after lunch since I had known her. Like a small ritual she had earned. "Rosalind came to me in 2012, Beatrice said. She asked me to set certain things up. She told me there would come a day. She told me I would know when that day was, because you would call me with a voice you had not used before." She was right. I am hearing it now. I asked her, very quietly, what she had set up. She said, "I cannot tell you on the phone." She said, "Can you come to my office tomorrow morning at 9? I told her I would be there. I said it without thinking. I would have said it without thinking even if I had been on the other side of the country. She said, "Teddy, there are some things you do not know. Some are about Rosalind. Some are about you. I have been keeping them for the day you would be ready. I think you might be ready now." I sat with the phone against my ear for a long second after she stopped speaking. The vines moved in the wind. The fog was almost gone. The sun was up. I said, "Beatrice, what did Rosalind know?" She said, "More than you did. About almost everything." Then she said goodbye. I sat there in the grass for another long while, not thinking, just sitting. There are moments when a man has been given too much information at once, and the right thing to do is to let the new shape of the world settle into the older shape until they are the same shape. When I finally stood up, my pants were soaked through. My back hurt worse than before. The sun was warm on the side of my face. I started the walk back to the house. I drove to Beatrice's office the next morning in the Ford. The truck was a 2003 F-15. Oh, that I had bought new and never replaced, because I had not yet found a good enough reason. Rosalind had once said the truck would bury me, not the other way around. I told her she was being literal about a metaphor she had invented herself, and she had laughed and said that was usually the way her metaphors worked. It was raining lightly. The kind of rain that made a man think about whether to use his wipers. I parked across from the brick building on Foss Street where Beatrice had kept her offices since 1990. The building was 123 years old. Up the wooden stairs. Second floor. The same wooden stairs that had creaked under me twice a year for 30 years in matters of property and tax, and once, terribly, for a will that had been read aloud while I sat in a leather chair and looked at the wall. Holland Pierce was at the front desk. She was 27. I had known her since she was 4. Her grandfather had been my partner in the very first acre of vineyard expansion in 1985. There was something in her face that morning I should have recognized and could not place. She told me Beatrice was expecting me. She did not smile. I went in. Beatrice was sitting at her desk in front of the safe. A Mosler. Manganese steel. 2 combination dials and a key. It had been in the office since Beatrice's father had practiced here in the 1970s. It had survived the 1989 earthquake. It had survived a flood in 2006. It had survived an electrical fire on the floor below in 2014 that had taken every other office on the block. She did not look at the safe. She did not look at me as I came in. She had a green folder on the desk and she pushed it across the wood without preamble. "Read this first," she said. I sat down. I opened the folder. The first document inside was a property entity registration, dated 2012, for an LLC named Callaway Land Holdings. The sole authorized signatory on transfers or sales of the underlying real property was Theodore Robert Callaway. My signature was on the second page, in the way I had been signing it since I was 24. I had no memory of signing that page. The second document was titled Callaway Heritage Covenant. 20 years of binding protection for 38 named workers and their dependents. Employment guaranteed, housing guaranteed, medical insurance guaranteed. The dependents named included 1 set of grandchildren born after Rosalind's death, which meant the document had been amended after she was gone, which was impossible. The third document was a county-level agricultural preservation designation, dated 2021, filed by Rosalind, signed by Rosalind, witnessed by Beatrice. The designation prohibited any conversion of the property to non-agricultural use for a period of 17 years from the date of filing, by any subsequent owner, regardless of intent. I looked up. Beatrice was looking at me now. She did this. I said, "All of this." She said, "Yes." I said, "In 2012. She said, "She began in 2012. She finished in 2021. 2021 was the year before Rosalind had been diagnosed. The year she had still believed she had decades left. The year she had been planting roses for what would have been her 50th birthday. I said, "Beatrice, why would she do this in 2012? What did she see in 2012? Beatrice did not answer. She stood up from her desk. She walked over to the Mosler safe. She put one open palm flat against the cold steel of the door. The way a person puts a hand on the chest of someone they are not sure is still breathing. She did not open it. She turned to me and she said, "There is one more document inside this safe. Rosalind asked me to keep it sealed until you were ready to look at 2 things at once. One thing about her. One thing about you," I said. 2 things. She nodded. I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "It means there are some things you do not know yet that will change how you read everything in this folder." I sat with the green folder open on my lap. The papers had the weight of decisions that had been made without me and on my behalf and for my protection. I felt many things at the same time. I asked, "How will I know when I am ready?" Beatrice walked back to her chair. She sat down. She folded her hands on the desk, the way she had folded them in 1993, when she had told me her husband had died of a stroke between Wednesday and Thursday. She said, "You will know when something comes up in your life that makes you want to lie to yourself about it. That is the day you need to come back here. That is the day I will open the safe." I looked at the green folder. I said. Beatrice. Was this Rosalind's idea of a legacy? Beatrice was quiet for a long second. Then she said, very gently, no. This was Rosalind's idea of a trap. She knew it might catch the wrong person. She built it anyway. I drove home with the folder in the seat beside me. I did not turn on the radio. I thought about the word trap, and the woman I had been married to for 43 years, and the things she had done that I had not seen her doing. The rain had stopped by the time I reached the gravel drive. I sat in the truck for a long minute without getting out. The folder beside me, the safe still locked. Two things I did not know about my own life waiting in a manganese box in a brick building in town. I went inside. The next afternoon was the kind of warm, late November afternoon that California gives you sometimes as an apology for the rain. By 2. The sky was clear and the temperature had climbed into the high 50s. I was at the front gate, replacing a board on the wooden fence that had warped over the summer. Rosalind had once said I fixed the fence so often because it was the only excuse I had not to be inside the house. She had not said it unkindly. The board I was setting that afternoon was redwood, 3 feet long. The nail kept bending. My hands had been bending nails too easily for about 10 years. I told myself it was the nails. I heard the engine before I saw the car, a white BMW, new model. Polished to a finish I had never seen on a vehicle that was meant to drive on Sonoma roads. It came up the gravel and stopped 20 feet from the gate. And Adrienne stepped out of the passenger side without waiting for the driver to circle around. She was not alone. Behind her came Spencer Vance, my son-in-law, in a gray Ralph Lauren polo and the kind of canvas slacks that men of his sort wear when they have decided to pretend it is the weekend. Behind him, a woman I did not recognize. Tall, dark hair clipped at the back, a black dress, a navy leather handbag the size of a small dog. I had never seen her on the property before. Daddy, Adrienne said. She crossed the gravel and put her arms around me and did not press her cheek to mine. I noticed the earrings before I noticed anything else. Rosalind had worn those pearls on the day Adrienne was born. 2 small drop pearls set in white gold. Her mother had given them to her on her own wedding day. Rosalind had told me once, with a smile that contained an entire instruction, that those earrings were to stay in the jewelry box on the dresser. Not loaned, not borrowed. They lived in the box. I had been the only person who took them out, once a year on her birthday, to clean them. They were on my daughter's ears. I did not say anything about it. I did not even let my eyes settle on them. I have been an accountant. I know how to look at one number on a page while seeming to look at the whole page. This is Marlena Voss, Adrienne said. She is the branding consultant I told you about. I had no memory of being told about her. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm in the way of women who have learned that firm grips are read as competence. How are you, Daddy? The question was pitched like a closing line in a presentation. I told her I was fine, none of which she had asked about with the intent of receiving an answer. We went inside. Adrienne led the tour the way she would have led one through a property she was preparing to list. Marlena followed with a small black notebook. By the way her eyes moved, the photographs in the entryway, the harvest schedule from 1996, and the throw blanket Rosalind had crocheted on the back of the sofa were all going to be removed before any photographs were taken. Teddy, Spencer said. He had the easy half-smile of a man who knew his charm was a kind of currency. Would you mind showing me your office? I want to look at the filing setup. I have some thoughts on how we can digitize the records. I told him I would have to find the key. I went to the mudroom. I made a show of moving things on the hook. I waited a long minute. Then I went back, by way of the hallway with the half-cracked door that looked into my office from the side, and stood out of sight and watched. Spencer had his phone out. The flash was firing. He was photographing the binders on the desk. He was photographing the file labels on the cabinet. He was photographing my old certificate of incorporation, framed on the wall. He took 26 photographs in 3.5 minutes. I counted because that is what an accountant does. I went back to the mudroom. I picked up the key from where it had always been. I walked it to him. He thanked me. He put his phone in his pocket, as if he had been checking the time. In the tasting room, I could hear Marlena talking about the lighting. She was saying the photograph of Rosalind on the back wall, the one Rosalind had hung herself the year before she got sick, was reading as too sentimental for the demographic. She used those words, for the demographic. Adrienne did not say anything to that. Then a different sound at the gate, a yellow taxi. The door opened and my granddaughter stepped out with a worn backpack on her shoulder. Magnolia, 19 years old. She had taken a Greyhound from Davis to Healdsburg and then a cab from the station. She had not told anyone she was coming. She walked across the gravel and came and stood beside me at the fence. Adrienne came back outside when she heard the gate. Adrienne, in Rosalind's pearls, said, "Daddy, Mama would want this vineyard to grow. You are keeping it in the past. Mama would not have wanted that." I watched my granddaughter watch my daughter. She looked at her mother with an expression I had not seen on any face in my family before. It was the look of a young woman who had finally decided to stop hoping a certain person was someone else. She did not speak. Adrienne and Spencer and Marlena left 20 minutes later. The BMW pulled out of the gravel drive and turned onto the county road, and was gone. The dust took a long time to settle in the still afternoon air. Magnolia stayed. After the BMW was out of sight, she leaned closer to me at the fence and she said, very quietly, "Grandpa, wait until tonight. There is something I need to give you." Magnolia came to my room at 11. She knocked twice. Soft. I had been awake. I had been thinking about pearls and 26 photographs and a yellow taxi. I opened the door. She had changed into a UC Davis hoodie, gray, sleeves pulled over her hands, hair back in a low ponytail, phone in her right hand. She did not say anything. She came in and sat on the brown leather wingback Rosalind had chosen in 2008 at an estate sale in Glen Ellen. The chair was deep enough that Magnolia, tall like her mother, could pull her feet up under her, and she did. I sat down across from her on the edge of the bed. "Grandpa," she said, "I am not going to say anything else. I just want you to listen." I told her to go ahead. She tapped at her phone. She set it on the table between us. "Screen up." She pressed play. The first voice was my daughter's. "Marcia," Adrienne said, "the legal team needs to draft a conservatorship petition. If we can get him committed for cognitive decline, the whole deal closes in 3 weeks. He just had a discharge incident at the hospital. We can frame it as memory lapse, disorientation. The Voss woman has documentation about the rose garden. He apparently agreed and then forgot. That is on file." A second voice, a woman I had never heard before, made a sound that was not a word. Adrienne kept going. "He is in his 70s. His wife died of cancer. He is grieving. He is fragile. He is making decisions that contradict his earlier wishes. We have witnesses. We have his medical record. 3 weeks. Marcia, tell legal we close in 3 weeks. The recording ended. Magnolia did not look at me. She was looking at her phone the way a doctor looks at a chart she is about to read aloud. I did not move. I could hear the refrigerator from the kitchen. I could hear the long, low wind in the southeast corner where the Zinfandel vines were. I could hear the tick of the hallway clock Rosalind had wound by hand for 38 years, and that I had not wound once since she died. After 2 minutes, Magnolia said, I was reading in Grandma's library. They thought everyone was on the tasting room tour. She stepped out into the hallway to take the call. The library door was open. She did not see me. I asked her, very quietly, how long she had known. She said, I have been suspicious for about a year. I have been certain since Monday. I asked her what had happened Monday. She said, Esperanza called me at school. She said you needed family. I did not know what that meant. So I told my professor I had a death in the family, which I think is what it was. I did not say anything. She kept going. Grandpa, Esperanza has been talking to the men and women in the workers' housing for 2 weeks. All of them know about the termination list. All of them know about the Voss woman. They are waiting for you. Esperanza told me when she called. She said, he will not stand up until somebody he loves more than himself stands up with him. She paused. Grandpa, she said, I have not spoken to my mother in 8 months. I had not known that. She kept going. She missed my high school graduation in June of last year. She was in Bordeaux, at a marketing conference for the wine company. I had sent her the date. She had said yes. The morning of, I got a text. Sweetheart, we will celebrate when I get back. The text was 11 words long. I counted because that is what your father's daughter does. She was quoting me back to me. I had not known she had heard me say it. She said, Grandma used to read me Steinbeck. She did it when I was 12. She said it was so I would understand California for what it actually was, not what the wineries put on their labels. She said you could not love a place properly until you knew what it had done to people. I nodded, because what else does a man do? Magnolia stood up. She picked up her phone. She did not press anything. She slid it into the pouch of her hoodie. She said, Grandpa, my mother is not a bad person. My mother is afraid. She has been afraid for a long time. But her fear is not a reason to destroy other people. I said her name. She said, I am going to bed. Tomorrow we can talk about what you want to do. Or we cannot. Either way is okay. She walked across the room and she stopped at the door and she turned back. She said, I love you, Grandpa. It was not the way she had said it to me when she was 6. It was the way a grown woman says it to a grown man whom she has decided to stand beside. Then she left. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. I picked up her phone. She had left it on the table. I do not know if she meant to. I think she did. I played the recording again. I played it a 3rd time. I played it a 4th. By the 4th time, I was no longer listening to my daughter's voice. I was listening to the silences between her sentences, the flatness of her tone, the way she had said the words discharge incident like a person who had been practicing them in the car on the way over. I thought about Beatrice. I thought about 2 truths. I thought about a daughter who had grown into a stranger inside the same house in which she had once drawn a man in a gray suit, standing 3 inches from a piano. I set the phone down on the table. I did not sleep. It rained all night. By 6, I had stopped pretending to sleep. I made coffee. I left the house at 7:30. Magnolia was still asleep. I left a note on the kitchen table that said only, "Back by lunch." I drove to Foss Street in the rain. The Ford's wipers were original and did not work well in heavy weather, which I had known for 2 years and not bothered to fix. The streets of Healdsburg were wet and empty. I parked across from the brick building and sat in the truck for a while. Then I crossed the street. Then I stood at the foot of the wooden stairs. Then I climbed them. Then I stood outside Beatrice Holmes' office door for 6 minutes. I do not know why I have to tell it that way. Each of those 6 things felt like a separate decision, and a man about to learn something terrible about himself takes those decisions one at a time. I went in. Holland Pierce was at the front desk. She did not say good morning. She nodded to me and lifted her chin toward the inner door. She had been waiting for me. Holland Pierce knew, this morning, more about my life than I did. Beatrice was at her desk. She looked up. I sat down across from her. I had been rehearsing the sentence since 2 in the morning. It was 4 words long. I delivered it without any inflection at all. Beatrice, I am ready. She nodded once. She did not ask if I was sure. She had been a lawyer for 48 years. She knew when a client used a sentence he had been rehearsing all night. The sureness was already accounted for. She stood up. She walked to the Mosler. She wore a chain around her neck. I had assumed for years it was a religious medallion. It was not. At the end of the chain was a key. She unlocked the first lock with the key on the chain. She unlocked the second with a key she took from her purse. She turned the combination dials. She pulled the door open. There were envelopes inside. Many of them. One had a wax seal the color of dried blood. Beatrice reached past all of the others. She took out one envelope and one envelope only. She closed the safe. She set the envelope on the desk in front of me. It was sealed with red wax. Pressed into the wax was a thumbprint. Rosalind's. I had known the shape of that thumb for 43 years. On the front of the envelope, in my wife's handwriting, were the words, "Open when Teddy is ready to face both truths." Beatrice said, "I am going to the front office for half an hour. Holland will make tea if you want it." She left. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat with the envelope for 4 minutes. I do not know what I thought about. I think I was waiting for a version of myself to arrive who would be able to open it. Then I opened it. There were 2 things inside. The first was a small leather-bound ledger, brown, with gold leaf edges darkened with age. The cover was unmarked. I knew the book before I looked at the title page. I had carried 100 like it between 1973 and 1981. The second was a smaller envelope, sealed with 2 strips of clear adhesive tape. I set it aside. I opened the ledger. The first page read, "Audit File, Hartwell Agricultural Holdings, Fiscal Year 1979, prepared by T. R. Calloway, junior partner. The handwriting was mine. It was the handwriting of a confident young accountant of 27 who had been told that very week he was being considered for full partnership. I read the first page. I read the second. I knew what I was looking at by the bottom of the first page. I made myself read every page anyway, because a man who has waited 47 years should not look at a thing with his eyes half closed. Inflated equipment depreciation. $86,000 overstated. Phantom labor expenses transferred from a subsidiary that did not exist. Backdated loss entries assigned to a contracted grower in Salinas Valley. The grower's name was on the bottom of page 11, Don Eduardo Robles. I stopped reading. I closed my eyes. I sat back in the chair. I remembered the office on Sutter Street. The 11th floor. 11 at night. I had been alone with one other person. Mason Hartwell Sr. was standing behind my chair, watching me sign. Holding a glass of his own scotch. "Tom," he had said, "this is how the world works. A Mexican farmer who does not know English will not understand what he is signing. We need numbers. They need debt forgiveness. You sign this and you make partner." I had signed. I had signed 7 or 8 times after that, until Hartwell Agricultural had received the tax position they had paid us to manufacture. Don Eduardo Robles had lost his farm in Salinas Valley 18 months later. I had not known him then. He had been a line on page 11. He had been the number that let me keep my office on the 11th floor. The smaller envelope was still on the desk. I did not open it yet. I looked at the ledger in my hand. I had not handled the book in 47 years. I had assumed Mason Hartwell Sr. had destroyed it. He had not destroyed it. He had given it to my wife. That was the only way the book could be where it was. He had given it to Rosalind, or she had walked into his office one afternoon and asked for it by name. I do not know which. I set the ledger down. Then I picked up the small, sealed envelope. I held it in my hand for a long while. Then I broke the tape. Inside the small envelope was a folded letter. The paper was Rosalind's good stationery. Cream. Heavy. She had bought it in Sausalito the year we moved into the house. She had used it only twice that I knew of. Once for my 50th birthday. Once for the letter to her own father, which she had written in 1988 and left in the desk drawer for him to find when he came to visit. The date at the top of the letter was the 14th of February. 2022. She had still been able to write a clean line in February. By April, she had not been able to hold a pen. She had died in June, so she had written this in the last clean month of her life. I read it. Teddy, my love, I have seen our daughter. I do not mean her face. I have seen the woman she has become, and I have seen, in her eyes, not yours. I have seen my own father. I have seen Robert Pierce, who was a cruel man with manners, who could ruin a person with a smile across a dinner table. She has his eyes. She has his way of looking at money. I have known about Hartwell Agricultural for 27 years. I went to Mason Hartwell Sr. in the spring of 1995. He was 80 by then and dying of something he would not name. He gave me the ledger because I asked for it. He gave it because he understood I knew what was in it without his having to confirm it. And because I think he wanted to give one truthful thing to one person before he died. He told me you had been the youngest junior partner he ever made, and the one he had been gladdest to ruin. I did not show you the book. I made you fund the heritage program instead, every year for 27 years. Without telling you why. You paid for your sin. Teddy, you did not know what you were paying for, but you paid. You paid the way a person who is good underneath pays. The other thing I want to tell you is harder. The trap I have built around our daughter is not to destroy her. It is to give her one last chance to choose differently. I have known her plans since 2019. I have known about Meridian. I have known about Marlena Voss. I have known about Spencer's photographs before he took them. I built the legal structure. I drafted the heritage covenant. I named the workers. I arranged with Beatrice the order in which everything would be revealed. I did this knowing that I would not live to see it. I did it because Adrian is mine. She is half of me, and the half of me she is. I owe a chance to. If she takes that chance, you will see her in 3 years, and she will be a different woman. If she does not, you will see her broken. That decision will be yours. I will not be there to make it for you. Teddy, I loved you. I loved you even after I read the ledger. I loved you more after. Because I saw a man who had built his second life in the shape of an apology to a man whose name he did not know. Matteo knows your name. He is known since 1986. He stayed anyway. Ask him why. I think you will need to. Yours always, Rosalind. I set the letter down on the desk. I did not cry. I had cried for Rosalind in June. I had cried again in October, when the harvest had come in without her, and I had stood alone at the press. I did not have crying in me right now. I had something quieter and harder. She had known about the ledger. She had known about Matteo. She had known about our daughter. She had known about Meridian. She had known about Spencer. She had built a structure I had walked through for 12 days without seeing. I sat for a long time. I do not know how long, probably 20 minutes, probably longer. There was a knock at the wall. It was the way Beatrice had said she would knock. 1 short, 2 short. I said, "Come in." She came in. She sat down. She looked at me with the same expression she had carried the day Rosalind had called her into the hospice room in May of 2022 and signed something I had not been told the content of. She said, "Teddy, I know you have read the letter. I am going to tell you one thing she did not put in writing." I waited. She said, "Matteo Robles came to your vineyard in the spring of 1984. He needed work. He used his real name because he was 29 and proud. He worked for 2 years before he understood who you were. He understood it in the summer of 1986. When he saw your framed accountant's certificate on the office wall, and matched the name to the audit notice his family had received before they lost the land. He came to my office that August. He had thought about it for 3 weeks. He was going to leave. He could not work for the man who had destroyed his father. I asked her what stopped him. Beatrice said, Rosalind did. I closed my eyes. She said, Rosalind asked him to stay, not to hide you, because she wanted you to be able, one day, to do the work of becoming someone who deserved his staying. She told him that day what she had only just learned herself. She told him she would spend her life making the man who had ruined his father into a man who could be ruined back by mercy. She asked him to stay. She told him he would know when it was time to speak. Beatrice paused. She said, Teddy, he has been waiting for 40 years. I drove back from Beatrice's office at noon. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still low and gray. I did not go to the house. I turned left past the main barn and took the gravel service road down to the worker housing. 6 small cottages in a row, each with a front porch and a lemon tree that Rosalind had planted, because she believed a person who could see a lemon tree from his kitchen window would feel that he had a home. Matteo's cottage was the last one on the left, the farthest from the main house. He had chosen it himself when he had arrived in the spring of 1984, and he had not moved in 40 years. I parked the truck. I sat for a while. A man in his 70s who needs to sit in trucks before he can walk into rooms is a man who knows what is waiting for him inside. I got out. I walked to the door. I knocked. Matteo opened it. He looked at my face the way a doctor looks at a test result he has been expecting. He did not seem surprised. He stepped back, and I went inside. The cottage was small. 1 room with a kitchen along the back wall and a bed in the corner. A wooden table with 2 chairs. On the wall above the bed was a photograph in a wooden frame. A man and a woman standing in front of a farmhouse. Between them, holding the man's hand, was a boy of about 5 or 6. I knew who they were before I sat down. Matteo went to the stove. He filled a small pot with water and set it on the burner and took down a can of coffee from the shelf. He measured 2 scoops into the pot. Then he opened a jar of sugar and put in 4 spoons. He stirred. He did not say anything while the coffee heated. I did not say anything either. We had known each other for 40 years and never not known what to say. This was different. This was 2 men sitting in a room where the truth had been living longer than either of them had been willing to look at it. The coffee was ready. He poured 2 cups. He set one in front of me. He sat down across the table. He said, "You read the book?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You read the letter?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I was 5 years old when we lost the farm." I did not say anything. He said, "My father did not understand the papers he signed. He could read Spanish. He could not read English. He trusted the man who brought the papers because the man wore a suit and spoke slowly and told my father he was helping him. My father signed because he believed that a man in a suit who spoke slowly was a man who meant well." He paused. He drank from his cup. He said, "We moved to a room above my uncle's garage in Watsonville. My mother took in laundry. My father picked strawberries for 3 years, and then he stopped picking strawberries, and then he stopped doing anything at all. He sat in a chair by the window, and he looked out at the street, and he waited for something that was not going to come back. He died in 1982. He was 59. Matteo looked at the photograph on the wall. He said, "I came to your vineyard because I needed work. I did not know who you were. I was 29. I was angry at many things, but I was not angry at a name on a page. I was angry at the suit. I was angry at the slow voice. I was angry at the system that had made my father believe that signing was the same as understanding." He said, "In the summer of 1986, I was repairing the fence along the south pasture, and I came into the house to use the bathroom, and I walked past your office and I saw the certificate on the wall. T.R. Callaway, Junior Partner, Hartwell Agricultural Holdings, 1973 through 1981. He stopped. He said, "I stood in that hallway for a long time." I said, "I know." He said, "I went to Beatrice. She told you that. She told you Rosalind asked me to stay." That is true. Rosalind did ask me to stay. But I want you to know something she did not tell you. Something I did not tell Rosalind either. He looked at me. He said, "I stayed because I watched you. I watched you for 2 years before I knew who you were. And I saw a man who talked to his vines the way my father talked to his strawberry rose. I saw a man who knew every worker's name. I saw a man who carried a guilt he could not name. I did not know what the guilt was. I just knew it was there. It was in the way you fixed things that did not need fixing. It was in the way you stood at the fence at the end of the day and looked out at nothing." He drank his coffee, 4 spoons of sugar. The cup was almost empty. He said, "When Rosalind asked me to stay, I had already decided to stay. She just gave me a reason I could live with. I could not speak." He said, "Teddy, I am 73 years old. I have worked your land for 40 years. I have eaten your food. I have slept under your roof. I have watched you become a man my father would not have hated. That is enough for me." I looked at the photograph on the wall, the boy of 5 or 6 holding his father's hand. I said, "Matteo, I am going to stand up at the festival. I am going to tell them what I did. I am going to say your father's name in front of everyone." He set his cup down. He said, "I know." He said, "I have been waiting for you to say that for 40 years. I called Adrienne that evening. I told her I needed to see her. I told her to come alone. She said she would come in the morning. She came at 9. I had set the ledger on the kitchen table, the brown leather cover facing up. I had not opened it. I had placed it in the center of the table the way a man places evidence in a courtroom. I had made coffee. I had set out 2 cups. I had not put sugar in either. Magnolia was not in the house. I had asked her to go to the worker housing and stay with Esperanza until I called. She had looked at my face and she had not asked why. Adrienne came through the front door without knocking. She was wearing a dark coat and flat shoes, and she had not done her hair the way she usually did. She looked like a woman who had not slept well. She walked into the kitchen and she saw the ledger on the table and she stopped. She did not say anything for a long time. I watched her face. I have been an accountant. I have read numbers on pages for 50 years, but I have never been able to read my daughter's face. Not when she was 8. Not when she was 18. Not now. She sat down across from me. She said, "You found it." I said, "Rosalind kept it. In Beatrice's safe. For 27 years." She nodded. She did not seem surprised. She seemed tired. She seemed like a woman who had been carrying something for a long time and who had been waiting, without knowing she was waiting, for someone else to pick it up. She said, "I found the other one." I did not understand. She said, "After Mama died, in June, I went through her desk, the one in the upstairs study, the drawer she always kept locked. I found a copy, not the original, a photocopy. She had made a photocopy and she had kept it in the drawer with a note that said, 'For when you need to understand your father.'" She looked at me. She said, "I read it in July, 2022. 1 month after we scattered her ashes under the Zinfandel vines." I did not move. She said, "Daddy, I read every page. I read the depreciation schedules. I read the phantom expenses. I read the name on page 11, Don Eduardo Robles. I read it and I sat in Mama's chair and I looked out the window at the vineyard and I thought about what this land was built on." She paused. She said, "I thought about Mateo. I had known him my whole life. He taught me to prune when I was 10. He carried me on his shoulders through the harvest rows when I was 4. And I sat in that chair, and I read the name of his father on a page of fraudulent tax documents prepared by mine." She was not crying. Her voice was flat. It was the voice of a woman who had already done her crying and had moved past it into something harder. She said, "I called Spencer that week. I told him I wanted to sell. He asked me why. I did not tell him about the ledger. I told him it was time. I told him the vineyard was too much for you alone. I told him Mama would have wanted us to be practical." She looked at the ledger on the table. She said, "That is what I told myself too. That I was being practical. That selling was the rational thing. That Meridian would manage the land better than a 75-year-old man with a bad back and a dead wife and a history he had never told anyone about." I said her name. She said, "Daddy, I am not going to apologize for what I have done. I know what the conservatorship petition looks like. I know what Spencer's photographs look like. I know what Marlena Voss looks like standing in Mama's tasting room, telling me that Mama's portrait is too sentimental for the demographic." She stopped. She took a breath. She said, "But I want you to know something. I did not start this because of money. I started this because I read page 11 and I could not look at you the same way. I could not sit at this table and eat dinner with a man who had destroyed a family and then hired the son of that family to work his land and never once, in 40 years, said the words, 'I am sorry.'" The kitchen was quiet. The clock in the hallway was not ticking. I had not wound it since Rosalind died, and I had not wound it still. She said, "I do not hate you, Daddy." She paused. A long pause. The kind of pause that holds a life inside it. She said, "I just do not trust you anymore." I sat with that sentence for a long time. I did not defend myself. A man who has read his own ledger does not get to defend himself to his daughter. A man who signed the papers that took a farm from a family in Salinas Valley does not get to explain to his daughter why she should trust him. I said, "Adrienne, you are right." She looked up. I said, "You are right not to trust me. I am not going to ask you to. I am going to do something at the festival on Friday. I am going to stand in front of everyone and I am going to say what I did. I am going to say Don Eduardo's name. I am going to say Mateo's name. I am going to tell them what this land was built on. She stared at me. I said, "After that, you can decide what you want to do. Sell, stay, leave. I will not stop you. But you will make that decision knowing the truth, and so will everyone else." She did not say anything. She stood up. She left the ledger on the table. She walked to the front door. She stopped with her hand on the frame. She said, very quietly, "Mama knew. Did she not?" I said, "Yes. She knew everything." Adrian nodded once. She walked out. She did not close the door behind her. The morning of the festival came the way November mornings come in Sonoma. Cold. Still. The fog sitting low in the valley like something that had decided to stay. I had not slept much. 2 nights of half-sleep since Adrian had walked out of the kitchen and left the door open behind her. I had spent those 2 days doing things that did not need doing. Checking the trellis wire on the east block, replacing a hinge on the barn door, oiling the press handle, carrying 3 cases of Zinfandel from the cellar to the tasting room for the festival tables. I had swept the porch twice on Wednesday and once on Thursday. Rosalind had once said I fixed things when I could not fix what needed fixing. She had been right about that. She had been right about most things. Magnolia had been in the house both nights. She had not asked me what had happened with her mother. She had cooked dinner on Thursday, pasta with garlic and olive oil and whatever she had found in the pantry. She had set the table for 2 and she had not set a 3rd place, and she had not explained why. Esperanza had come by on Thursday afternoon. She had stood on the porch and she had spoken quietly. She had said the workers were ready. She had said she would be at the festival by 8. She had said she had the list. I had asked her which list. She had looked at me and she had said, "The list of 41 names. The original. The one she typed." I had nodded. She had left. Mateo had come to the house on Thursday evening. He had knocked on the back door. He had stood in the doorway and he had not come inside. He was wearing a clean shirt I had not seen before. He had said only one thing. He had said, "I will be there tomorrow. I will stand where you can see me." Then he had left. Now it was Friday. 6:30 in the morning. The festival would begin at 10. I stood in front of the closet in the bedroom. Rosalind and I had shared for 41 years. Her side was still full. I had not moved her clothes. I had not been able to. Her dresses hung next to my shirts the way they had always hung. And some mornings I could still smell her perfume in the fabric, though I knew that was not possible after 2.5 years, and I did not care whether it was possible or not. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand. Her slippers were still by the bed. I reached past her things, and I took out the gray suit. It was not new. I had bought it in 1987 at a men's store on 4th Street in San Rafael. It was the suit I had worn to Adrian's christening. It was the suit I had worn to her 8th birthday party in the backyard. It was the suit I had worn to her high school graduation. It was the suit I had worn to her wedding. It was the suit I had worn to Rosalind's funeral. It was the suit my daughter had drawn when she was 8 years old. A man in a gray suit standing 3 inches from a piano. She had drawn it on a piece of white construction paper with a crayon that was not quite the right shade, and she had written beneath it, in the careful block letters of a child, "This is my daddy, he is very tall." I put the suit on. The jacket was loose. I had lost weight since June. The trousers needed a belt I had not needed 2 years ago. The shirt collar was wide around my neck. I looked at myself in the mirror on the back of the closet door, and I saw a man who was smaller than the suit he was wearing. And I thought that was probably right. I had always been smaller than the things I had done. Smaller than the fraud. Smaller than the silence. Smaller than the wife who had spent 27 years building a structure of mercy around a man who had not deserved it. I buttoned the jacket. I adjusted the collar. I looked at my hands. They were the hands of a 75-year-old man. They were the hands that had signed the Hartwell schedules. They were the hands that had planted the first Zinfandel vine in 1981 with Rosalind standing beside me holding a garden hose. They were the hands that had carried Adrian from the hospital on the day she was born. They were the same hands. I went downstairs. Magnolia was in the kitchen. She was wearing a clean white shirt and her hair was down, and she had made coffee. She looked at me in the gray suit, and she did not say anything for a moment. Then she put her hand on my arm and held it there, and then she let go. I drank the coffee standing up. I looked out the kitchen window. The fog was beginning to lift. I could see the top of the barn, and beyond it, the first rows of vines, and beyond that, the southeast corner where the 2 old Zinfandel plants stood and where Rosalind's ashes were. The festival tent was already up. White canvas. Esperanza's crew had raised it at dawn. I said, to no one in particular, and to everyone. Today I will stop lying. Magnolia heard me. She did not respond. She picked up her keys, and she walked out to the truck, and she started it, and she waited for me. I left the coffee cup on the counter. I walked through the front door. The door Adrian had not closed 2 days ago. Someone had closed it since. I did not know who. I did not think it mattered. What mattered was that I was walking through it now. I pulled it shut behind me. I walked to the truck where my granddaughter was waiting. The festival tent was full by 10. Esperanza had set up the tables the way Rosalind had always set them. Long wooden boards on sawhorses, covered in white cloth. Wine glasses at each place. 3 bottles of the estate Zinfandel at each table. The harvest wreath on the post at the entrance, made of dried grapevine and lavender, the way Rosalind had made them every year since 1983. The difference was that this year the wreath had been made by Inez Ruiz, Esperanza's sister, who had woven it at 4 a.m. because she had not been able to sleep. People came from Healdsburg and from Geyserville and from Windsor. They came because they had always come. The Callaway Harvest Festival had been held every November for 42 years. It was the kind of event that people in Sonoma County put on their calendars without being asked. They came for the wine and for the food and for the chance to stand in a vineyard in late autumn and feel that something was being celebrated even if they could not name what it was. I stood near the back of the tent. Magnolia was beside me. She had her phone in the pocket of her jacket. She had not taken it out. Matteo was standing at the far end of the first row of chairs. He was wearing the clean shirt. He was looking at me. He nodded once. I saw Adrian arrive at 10:15. She came alone. No Spencer, no Marlena. She was wearing a dark coat and the pearl earrings. I noticed them before I noticed anything else. She stood at the edge of the tent, near the entrance, and she did not come closer. At 10:30, Esperanza walked to the front of the tent. She was wearing a white blouse and a dark skirt, and her hair was pulled back, and she was carrying a single sheet of paper. She did not use a microphone. She did not need one. Esperanza Ruiz had a voice that could carry across a vineyard in a windstorm. She had been using it for 41 years. She stood in front of the crowd, and she said, "I have worked at Callaway Vineyards for 41 years. My sister Inez has worked here for 37. Between us, we have given this land 78 years of our lives." She paused. She said, "3 weeks ago, a woman named Marlena Voss came to this property and gave me an envelope. Inside the envelope was a list of names, 41 names, every worker on this vineyard, every man and woman who has planted and pruned and picked and pressed on this land. The letter said our positions were being evaluated for potential restructuring. That is a way of saying we were being fired." She held up the paper. She said, "I am going to read the names." She read them, all 41. She read them slowly. She read them the way a person reads the names of the dead at a memorial, because that is what they were. They were the names of people whose lives were being ended in a form they had not been told about and had not agreed to. She read Inés Ruiz. She read Carlos Delgado. She read Maria Esperanza Flores. She read Gabriel Ochoa. She read name after name after name, and with each name a person in the crowd shifted or looked down or put a hand over their mouth, because each name belonged to someone they knew, someone who had been at this festival last year and the year before and the year before that. When she reached the end of the list, she folded the paper and she put it in the pocket of her skirt. She said, "None of us were told. None of us were asked. None of us were given a reason." She stepped back. The tent was silent. The kind of silence that has weight. The kind that presses down on a room the way fog presses down on a valley in the morning and does not move. Then Magnolia stepped forward. She was 19 years old. She was wearing a clean white shirt. She was holding her phone. She walked to the front of the tent, and she stood where Esperanza had stood, and she said, "My name is Magnolia Vance. I am Theodore Callaway's granddaughter. I'm going to play something for you. It is a recording of a phone call made by my mother, Adrienne Callaway Vance, to a woman named Marcia Klein at Meridian Wine Holdings. The call was made in this house earlier this week. She connected her phone to the small Bluetooth speaker Esperanza had placed on the table. She pressed play. Adrienne's voice filled the tent. "Marcia, the legal team needs to draft a conservatorship petition. If we can get him committed for cognitive decline, the whole deal closes in 3 weeks. He just had a discharge incident at the hospital. We can frame it as memory lapse, disorientation." The second voice, the sound that was not a word. "He is in his 70s. His wife died of cancer. He is grieving. He is fragile. He is making decisions that contradict his earlier wishes. We have witnesses. We have his medical record. 3 weeks. Marcia. Tell legal we close in 3 weeks." The recording ended. Magnolia did not say anything else. She picked up her phone. She walked back to where I was standing. She stood beside me. I looked across the tent at my daughter. Adrienne was standing at the edge of the tent where she had been standing since she arrived. She had not moved. Her face was the color of the canvas above her. Her hands were at her sides. She was looking at me the way a person looks at a thing that has finally happened after years of knowing it would. She did not leave. She stayed. The silence after the recording held for what felt like a long time. It was probably 30 seconds. It felt like a year. Then Beatrice Holm walked to the front of the tent. She was carrying a leather briefcase, the same one she had carried into her office the day I had first sat across from her. She was wearing a dark blue suit and her hair was pinned back, and she walked the way she always walked, which was the way a woman walks who has spent 48 years entering rooms where she was the only person who knew what was about to happen. She set the briefcase on the table. She opened it. She took out 2 documents. She said, "My name is Beatrice Holm. I am an attorney. I have represented Theodore Calloway and his late wife Rosalind Calloway for 31 years. I am here today in my capacity as executor of certain legal instruments prepared by Rosalind Calloway between 2012 and 2021. She held up the first document. She said, "This is the Calloway Heritage Covenant. It is a binding agreement, signed by Theodore Calloway as sole owner of Calloway Land Holdings, that guarantees employment protection, housing rights, and healthcare coverage for 38 named workers on this property for a period of 20 years. It was drafted by Rosalind Calloway. It was signed by Theodore Calloway. It is legally binding and cannot be revoked by any transfer of ownership, any conservatorship proceeding, or any corporate acquisition." She set it down. She held up the second document. She said, "This is the registration of Calloway Vineyards with the Sonoma County Agricultural Preserve. It was filed in 2021. Under this designation, the property cannot be converted to non-agricultural use for a period of 17 years. Any attempt to rezone, develop, or repurpose this land for commercial non-agricultural activity is prohibited by county ordinance." She set it down. She said, "I would like to introduce someone." A young woman stood up from the second row. I had seen her before. I had seen her 2 days ago at the front desk of Beatrice's office, where she had nodded to me and lifted her chin toward the inner door. Holland Pierce. 27 years old, Beatrice's paralegal. But she was not standing as a paralegal today. She said, "My name is Holland Pierce. I am the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation Officer. I am here to confirm that the Calloway Vineyards Agricultural Preserve designation is active, registered, and enforceable. Any attempt to circumvent this designation would require a formal county review process that takes a minimum of 3 years." She paused. She said, "I would also like to say something personal. My grandfather was Holloway Pierce. He was a county assessor in Sonoma for 34 years. He worked with Rosalind Calloway on the original preserve application. He told me, before he died, that Rosalind Calloway was the most patient woman he had ever known. He said she had been planning this for longer than most people plan anything." She sat down. I looked at her face. I understood now why it had seemed familiar when I had first seen her in Beatrice's office. She had her grandfather's jaw. She had his way of looking at a room as if measuring it for something that had not been built yet. Then Beatrice turned to me. She said, "Teddy." I stood up. I walked to the front of the tent. I walked past the tables and the wine glasses and the harvest wreath that Inez had woven at 4 in the morning. I walked past Esperanza, who was standing with her arms at her sides. I walked past Mateo, who was in the front row, in the clean shirt, looking at me the way he had been looking at me for 40 years. I stood where Esperanza had stood, where Magnolia had stood, where Beatrice had stood. I said, "My name is Theodore Robert Calloway." I said, "I am 75 years old. I have owned this vineyard for 43 years. I have lived on this land with my wife and my daughter, and I have built what I have built, and I have hidden what I have hidden," I said. In 1979, I was a junior partner at an accounting firm on Sutter Street in San Francisco. I was 27 years old. I was asked by my employer, Mason Hartwell Sr., to prepare fraudulent tax documents for a client called Hartwell Agricultural Holdings. I prepared them. I signed them. The fraud included inflated depreciation, phantom expenses, and backdated loss entries that were assigned to a contracted grower in Salinas Valley. I stopped. I looked at Mateo. I said, "The grower's name was Don Eduardo Robles." Mateo did not move. He did not look away. He looked at me the way he had looked at me in his cottage 2 days ago, across a table with 2 cups of coffee and 4 spoons of sugar. I said, "Don Eduardo Robles lost his farm because of what I did. He moved his family to a room above a garage in Watsonville. He picked strawberries for 3 years. Then he stopped. He died in 1982. He was 59 years old." I said, "His youngest son, Mateo Robles, came to work at this vineyard in 1984. He has been here for 40 years. He has known who I was since 1986. He stayed anyway." I looked at Mateo. I said, "I am sorry." I said it again. "I am sorry." I said, "I should have said those words 47 years ago. I did not. I am saying them now. Not because it is enough. Because it is what I owe." The tent was quiet. I looked across the room at my daughter. She was standing at the edge of the tent. She was wearing the pearl earrings and the dark coat, and she was looking at me, and I could not read her face. I have never been able to read her face, but she was still there. I stepped down from the front of the tent. The crowd did not move. They were looking at me the way people look at a man who has just said something that cannot be unsaid. Some of them were looking at Mateo. Some of them were looking at Adrienne. Most of them were looking at the ground. I did not look at Beatrice. I did not look at Holland Pierce. I did not look at the documents on the table. I looked only at my daughter. I walked across the tent. I walked past the tables and the wine and the harvest wreath. I walked past Esperanza, who touched my sleeve as I went by. I walked past Magnolia, who did not touch me, but whose eyes followed me the way a lighthouse follows a ship. I walked to the edge of the tent where my daughter was standing. She was taller than me now. Or maybe she had always been taller, and I had not noticed. She was standing very still. Her hands were at her sides. Her coat was buttoned to the collar. She had not put on makeup today. She looked younger without it. She looked like the girl I had driven to her first day of middle school. the one who had sat in the passenger seat and had not said a word. The pearl earrings were on her ears, catching the thin November light the way they had always caught light, the way they had caught it on the day she was born, when Rosalind had worn them and held her for the first time. I stopped in front of her. I did not say anything. I raised my hands, slowly. The way a man raises his hands when he wants to show that he is not holding anything, that he is not going to hurt anyone, that the only thing he is reaching for is something that belongs to someone who is no longer here. I touched the first earring, the left one. I unclipped it gently. I held it in my palm. Then I reached for the right one. I unclipped it. I held both of them. They were warm from her skin. I thought about Rosalind's jewelry box. Not loaned, not borrowed. They lived in the box. Adrienne did not move. She did not flinch. She did not pull away. She stood there and she let her father take her mother's earrings from her ears the way she had let him carry her from the car when she was small, the way she had let him walk her down the aisle, the way she had let him hold her hand at Rosalind's funeral before she had read the ledger and before she had stopped trusting him. She looked at me. Her face was not the face I had been unable to read for 41 years. It was a different face. It was a face that had been stripped of everything it had been wearing, the way a wall looks after you have taken down all the photographs. It was bare. It was tired. It was the face of a woman who had been carrying something she had not known how to put down. She said, very quietly, "I do not know how to come back from this." "Daddy," I said. "I do not know either." She looked at the earrings in my hand. 2 small drop pearls set in white gold. Her mother's, her grandmother's before that. They sat in my palm the way 2 small birds sit on a branch when there is nowhere else to go. She said, "Tell Matteo I am sorry, too." Then she turned around. She walked out of the tent. She walked past the entrance with the harvest wreath. She walked onto the gravel drive and then onto the county road, and she kept walking. I did not follow her. A father knows when his daughter needs to be followed and when she needs to be let go. I had spent 41 years getting that wrong. I was not going to get it wrong today. I watched her go. She did not look back. She walked for a long time. She did not stop. She did not turn around. She walked past the stone wall at the edge of the property. I could see her dark coat getting smaller against the gray road and the gray sky and the brown hills beyond the vineyard. She walked the way a person walks, who has decided that the only thing left to do is to move the body forward and let the mind catch up when it is ready. Magnolia came and stood beside me. She said, "Should I go after her?" I said, "No." She said, "How far will she walk?" I said, "I do not know. As far as she needs to." Esperanza came out of the tent. She stood on the other side of me. She did not say anything. She put her hand on the fence post and she looked at the road and she breathed out once. Slowly. The way a person breathes when they have been holding their breath for a long time. We stood there for a while. Magnolia and Esperanza and I. At the edge of the tent, looking out at the county road where my daughter was walking alone toward the hills. The fog had lifted completely. The sun was out for the first time in 4 days. It was the kind of November sun that does not warm anything but lights everything. And my daughter was walking into it, getting smaller, until she was the size of the girl who had drawn a man in a gray suit on a piece of white construction paper, and then smaller still, until I could not see her at all. I put the earrings in my breast pocket, against my heart, where Rosalind would have wanted them. Matteo was standing behind me. I had not heard him come up. He said, "She will come back." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because she is your daughter, and your daughter does not walk away from things. She walks toward them. She just does not always know it yet." 3 months passed. February came to Sonoma the way February always comes. Rain and then sun and then rain again. The mustard weed bloomed yellow between the vine rows. The pruning crews were out by 7 every morning, and I could hear the snap of the shears from the kitchen window while I drank my coffee standing up, the way I had been drinking it since November. Meridian Wine Holdings withdrew their offer on the 14th of January. Beatrice had received the letter from their legal counsel. It was 2 paragraphs long. It said the company had decided to pursue other opportunities in the Central Valley. It did not mention the Heritage Covenant. It did not mention the agricultural preserve. It did not mention the recording. It did not mention my daughter's name. Beatrice had read it to me over the phone and had said, "That is the sound of a door closing. Teddy," she had said. Rosalind would have wanted to hear that door close. I had said, "I think she did." Spencer Vance had filed for separation in December. I had learned this from Magnolia, who had learned it from a cousin on Spencer's side, who had not known she was not supposed to tell anyone. The conservatorship petition had been withdrawn in November, 3 days after the festival. Marlena Voss had returned to San Francisco. I had not heard her name spoken on the property since. Magnolia had come back. She had finished her fall semester at Davis in December. She had called me on Christmas morning, and she had said, "Grandpa, I am coming home. I am going to take the spring semester off." She had arrived on the 2nd of January with 2 suitcases and the same worn backpack, and she had moved into her old room, and she had not left. She was working the vineyard. She was learning from Esperanza. She was learning the soil composition and the irrigation schedule, and the difference between a vine that needed water and a vine that needed to be left alone. Esperanza had told me, one evening on the porch, that Magnolia had Rosalind's hands. I had not known what that meant. Esperanza had said, "She touches the vine before she cuts. She listens to it. Your wife did that." Matteo was still in the last cottage on the left. He had not moved. He had not said much since the festival. He did not need to. Something had shifted between us that did not require words. I brought him coffee on Thursday mornings now. I made it with 4 spoons of sugar. He drank it without comment. We sat on his porch and we looked at the lemon trees, and we did not talk about Don Eduardo or Sutter Street or the summer of 1986. We had already said those things. They did not need to be said again. The clock in the hallway was ticking. Magnolia had wound it on the day she arrived. I had not asked her to. She had done it the way her grandmother would have done it, with 2 fingers on the key and a quarter turn, and then listening for the sound. Inez Ruiz was still making the bread for the worker housing kitchen. Her diabetes was managed. I was still paying her insurance. She did not know that. I did not plan to tell her. I had not heard from Adrienne. 3 months. Not a call. Not a text. Not a letter. Magnolia had heard from her once, in January, a short message that said only, "I am in Mendocino. I am okay. Do not worry." Magnolia had shown me the message and had not said anything about it, and I had not said anything about it either. On the first Tuesday of February, Beatrice called. She said, "Teddy, I need to come by the house. There is one more thing." She arrived at 2 in the afternoon. She was carrying a small envelope, not the kind from the Mosler safe, a regular envelope, white, sealed. She sat down at the kitchen table. Magnolia made tea. Beatrice held the envelope in both hands the way she held things that were important enough to hold with both hands. She said, "Rosalind gave me this in May of 2022, 1 month before she died. She told me to give it to Adrienne, not to Teddy, to Adrienne. She told me to give it to her only after everything else had happened. After the festival, after the truth, after the walking." She paused. She said, "I think it is time." She set the envelope on the table. On the front, in Rosalind's handwriting, it said, "For my daughter, when she is ready to remember." I looked at the envelope. I did not touch it. "It was not mine," Magnolia said. "I will take it to her." Beatrice looked at her. Magnolia said, "I know where she is. I will drive to Mendocino. I will give it to her myself." She picked up the envelope. She held it carefully. She put it in the inside pocket of her jacket, the same pocket where she had carried her phone the night she had played me the recording in November. Beatrice stood up. She finished her tea. She walked to the front door. She said, "Rosalind told me one more thing that day in the hospice room." She said, "Beatrice, my daughter will break before she bends, but she will bend. Give her time. Give her the letter, and then let her decide." She left. The house was quiet. The clock ticked. The mustard weed outside the window was so yellow it looked like it was trying to replace the sun. Magnolia picked up her keys. She said, "I will be back by Thursday. Grandpa." I said, "Drive safe." She walked out to the truck. She started it. She pulled out of the gravel drive and turned onto the county road, and she was gone. I stood at the kitchen window for a long time. I could see the southeast corner where the 2 old Zinfandel vines stood, where Rosalind's ashes were. The vines were bare. It was February, but there were buds, small green points at the joints of the canes. The first sign that the vine was still alive, that it had survived the winter, that it was getting ready to grow again. On the following Saturday, I went to the closet in the hallway, on the top shelf, behind a box of Christmas ornaments. I found the shoebox. I opened it. The painting was still inside. White construction paper, yellowed at the edges. A man in a gray suit standing 3 inches from a piano. The crayon had faded, but the letters were still clear. "This is my daddy, he is very tall." I held it for a while. I went to the workshop behind the barn. I had not been in there since before the festival. Rosalind had given me the lathe for my 60th birthday because she said a man who spent his life with numbers needed something to do with his hands that did not involve counting. I found a piece of walnut I had been saving. I measured it. I cut it. I sanded it smooth with 3 grains, coarse to fine, the way my father had taught me in his garage in Sacramento when I was 12. I built a small box, just large enough to hold the painting flat without folding it. I lined the inside with cloth from one of Rosalind's old scarves. I placed the painting in the box. I closed the lid. I wrapped it in brown paper, and I drove to the post office in Healdsburg, and I mailed it to Mendocino. The woman at the counter asked if I wanted to insure it. I said no. Some things cannot be insured. I did not include a note. The painting was the note. That evening, Esperanza came and sat on the porch with me. She brought 2 glasses of water. She sat in the chair Rosalind had always sat in, the one on the left, the one with the view of the southeast corner. We did not talk for a long time. The sun was going down behind the hills. The sky was the color of a peach that is almost ripe. The vineyard was turning gold in the last light. The lemon trees in front of the worker cottages were beginning to flower, small white blossoms against the dark branches. I could smell them from the porch. It was the kind of evening that Sonoma gives you when it has decided to stop testing you. The roses were not there anymore. Marlena Voss had ordered them pulled up, and they had not grown back. But Esperanza had planted jasmine along the trellis where the roses had been. She had not asked permission. She had said, "Something has to grow there." "Might as well be something that smells good at night," Esperanza said. "It is a good evening," I said. "Yes," she said. "Your wife would have liked this evening," I said. "She would have liked the lemon blossoms. She always said they smelled like forgiveness." Esperanza smiled. It was the first time I had seen her smile since November. She said, "Forgiveness does not smell like anything." Teddy. But I know what she meant. We sat until the sun was gone and the stars came out. The way they come out in Sonoma in February. Slowly, one at a time. As if each one needed permission from the one before it. We listened to the crickets and the quiet breathing of a vineyard that was no longer in danger. A week later, the mail came. A small envelope. No return address. Postmarked Mendocino. Inside was a Polaroid. The kind of photograph that develops in your hand while you hold it. The way some truths do. It was a picture of a kitchen wall. A small kitchen. On the wall, taped with 2 strips of clear adhesive tape, was the painting. A man in a gray suit standing 3 inches from a piano. "This is my daddy. He is very tall." On the back of the Polaroid, in my daughter's handwriting, were 7 words. I am learning how to remember again. I held the photograph for a long time. I held it the way I had held the earrings in November, warm from my daughter's skin. The way I had held the ledger in Beatrice's office, the handwriting of a young man I no longer recognized. The way I had held my wife's letter on the morning I learned she had known everything and loved me anyway. Every important thing I have held in my life has been small enough to fit in one hand. A ledger, a letter, a pair of earrings, a Polaroid, and a daughter's trust. which is the smallest and the heaviest thing of all. I put the Polaroid on the refrigerator with the magnet Magnolia had brought from Davis, the one shaped like a small bear. I stepped back. The painting looked different on the refrigerator than it had looked in the shoebox. In the shoebox, it had been a memory. On the refrigerator, it was a conversation. A girl saying to her father, across 41 years and 200 miles, "I drew you once. I am drawing you again." A man in a gray suit on a kitchen wall in Mendocino, drawn by a girl who was 8, sent back by a woman who was 41, received by a father who was 75, watched over by a wife who was not there and who was everywhere. I do not know if God gives us second chances or if we build them ourselves out of the wreckage of the first ones. I do not know if mercy is something that comes down from above or something that grows up from the soil the way a vine does, slowly, one season at a time. I think maybe God works through patient women and stubborn old men and granddaughters who know how to wind a clock. I think that is enough. I think that is more than enough. The vines were growing. The blossoms were open. The clock was ticking. I went inside. If this story reached your heart, carry it with you the way Rosalind carried her letters. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to say the words you owe. Tell me in the comments about the door you need to walk through, the name you need to say out loud, and if you have not yet spoken those words to the person who needs to hear them. Perhaps today is the day you begin. God bless you and your family. Follow this channel so you do not miss what comes next. And thank you, truly, for listening.